Today we're going to do a Powder River Precision XDM trigger kit. This is your Springfield Armory XDM 5.25, I believe it is. First thing we do is always check to make sure the firearm's unloaded. Drop the magazine, release the slide, take the field strip the XDM into its basic parts, and so you got your I guess your lower, your frame, and you have your slide. And this is the kit right here. The kit comes with two striker springs, and it comes with three smaller springs here. And one of these strings is the hammer sear spring, and the other one is the trigger spring. And there's three springs there, but two of them are trigger springs. And there's also two striker springs. And the two with paint on them, they say it's blue paint, but it looks more like black to me. But the two with paint on them are the ones that are the competition ones that give you a little lighter feel to it. And if you want a little more, gives you about 3.25 pounds of pull on the trigger, and the reset's real light. If you want a little heavier trigger, then you pick the two springs without the paint that make a trigger a little heavier. So at any rate, is what I do is I take the scissors and I snip the bottom of this off so that when it comes apart, I can use it as a little tray for holding all my parts, so I don't lose my parts. I open it up, and here's the instructions. They can come in handy. It's kind of a blow up of the XDM pistol. And then here's all your parts. And I already know that I want to use the competition springs. So I'm going to take the two that are the non-competition springs right out of the kit to start with. So there's that one. I'm not using it. And then when I go in here and I get these three little springs out, I'm going to take the one for the trigger that's not got the paint on it, and I'm going to set it aside. So these are the two that are going in. Here's my new trigger that it's going to go in. Here's my new safety disengager, I think call it. And here's my new spring. And then this is the little spring that goes in the in the slide here. So anyway, now we have the parts that we're going to use. They're right in here, and it's pretty straightforward and pretty easy. Here's all the tools we're going to use, which is a scissors to open a package. I'm already done with those. Won't need those again. A couple of small screwdrivers to push pins out. A little pointy little awl, or a little pick that I can get in and get things with. A little hammer to drive my punches with. When we take these guns apart, they're usually got some grime in them, so I got a little brush to scrub them out with. Pair of needle nose, a little grease, maybe a pocket knife, which I doubt we'll need, and a little lube and a little solvent in case we need to clean anything. So I'll go ahead and pause. And we'll also need some punches. I don't know what size these are, but you just pick out the ones that are appropriate for the pins you're going to drive out with them. And then you also want a punch that's appropriately sized for removing the striker on the back here. So we'll start out with the sear spring and the hammer spring. Then there's a pin right here, and we're going to push this pin out from the right side to the left. And don't even need a little hammer to tap it with. You put your finger on top of the hammer so nothing springs out when the pin falls out. Okay, so now we got to get the rest of this. There's another small pin in here that holds the springs and so forth in. And when you start drifting that one over, then the whole hammer and everything will usually fall right out of here for you. And right out the bottom. So there's those three parts. And here's the little pin that you have to take out. You don't even have to take it all the way out. It just comes out this far. And then this pin was in this hole that was holding the hammer and anything and all that together. Now there's two springs that are mated to each other that operate. One of them operates the hammer and one of them operates the safety disconnect. And these two springs are mated inside each other, and is what you're going to do is you're just going to take both these springs and set them aside with your parts you don't need anymore, and you're going to take your new hammer spring and it replaces both of those springs, and that's what we're going to replace right there. And we're going to take and we're going to set our safety disconnect aside right there, and we're going to take our new one and set in place of it and exchange that part. And this is one of those points where I had that brush and so forth so that I could clean the grime off this hammer that's been accumulating in there. It's a good time to give a thorough cleaning of any parts that are gooed up that you couldn't get at in normal cleaning. You got this apart. Okay, now you just reassemble it with the new spring. Okay, so the pin goes in from the right side and it just extends in far enough so that you can mount the safety disconnector onto the pin. And then the safety disconnector sits on the pin just like this. And then you have to get your hammer in, and your hammer, it's kind of tricky, a little bit of a juggling act in some ways. Comes in here and goes in, and now you can flip this lever down, the disconnect, just take down lever down, and then you can push the pin through the hammer. And now you take your punch and you just push the pin back out enough, your skinny little punch, if I can find the right one. And push this back out enough just so that you can put this hammer spring in this way. So if you look at the spring, it goes this way. Push this out just enough. Put the spring in, push the pin back through, but not all the way through the hammer, so that now you can put the extractor in, and now the pin goes through the extractor, theoretically. And now everything's held in place now. Now you can come back through the front of the extractor with the small pin that you had there. And that pin also holds the spring, so you have to reach down in here, you have to pick up, you have to push the top of the spring down, and then finish pushing the pin through so that puts tension on the spring, and this pin holds the spring. So if you look in here, you can see that the spring's under the pin now. Now you can check your trigger by putting the takedown lever back down, and then you can check the reset on it. And you should be able to pull the trigger and see the safety come up and then hit the reset, and then that'll drop down. And if that's all working right, then you've got that part accomplished. And we'll move on to the second part, which is getting the trigger takedown done. So you take your it's not easy because there's a spring underneath of it right here that retains it, and you got to get it past that spring. And if you look, there's a groove in it right here that retains it in the spring. But once you get it past that point, then you can pop it out, and then you can take your pin punch, maybe a little bit bigger one, and you can drive these pins out of your trigger assembly. Not good for the screwdriver, but it'll still work. Get that out of there. Okay, so now my trigger's free. And we can wiggle the trigger assembly, pull it out of there, fits right in like this. There's a hole here, the little curvature, the spring fits in the hole, and it rides right up like this. And this is the one that retains the takedown lever. You set that aside. Now we can pull the trigger out. We can pull the connecting rod there out, and then we can pull the trigger out, and along the side of the trigger will be the trigger bar. You set that down. It comes apart this way. Take the spring off of the pressure off the spring and pull that out. And now we can clean these parts before we put the new trigger spring in and the new trigger. So we can set this trigger aside and get our new trigger here. We can set this spring aside and we can get our new spring. We can clean these parts. This is our chance to do some cleaning that we don't normally do on these guns when they're all apart. If the gun was even more gooey, you could use some solvent on it. This isn't dirty enough that it needs all that. Just brush some of this stuff out that we couldn't get before. A Q-tip works real good for all of this. Okay, so now we can go back together with our trigger. So what we'll do is we'll put our trigger spring. Here's our trigger. We'll put our spring here. We'll put our transfer bar right here, and then when we ratchet that down, that comes under some tension. Clean any debris out of this. Put the transfer bar back in. Rotate it up, the trigger down into place. Put this transfer bar here back into place. And you can feel it fits right in the notch back here and then right in this notch here up front. Now we can put the spring back into place here. And the trigger block back in, and we're going to do that by pushing in on the trigger a little bit and then setting this right in its position. And it should just go right in just like that. Trigger works. You hold down on it so it don't work its way back out. Make sure you got the transfer bar and the trigger bar working. And then what we're going to do now is we're just going to tap our pins. We're going to line up the trigger by pushing on it a little bit. First we're going to put the front pin in because it'll be aligned. And then we're going to line up the trigger by pushing on the trigger just to where we can see through here. Is a pin punch. To line everything up with the pin punch, and then put our pin in using the pin punch to hold everything straight, and then tap the pin punch out with the pin. And then you can come back and you can even the pins out with. Make sure the pins are about equal on both sides. They're usually a spring there. Okay, this is part 2 of the Springfield XDM Powder River trigger kit install. In the first part, I did all the parts in the frame of the pistol, and in this part I'm going to do the last couple of parts, which is just 2 springs, the striker spring and the striker safety spring that go in the slide. So we'll start out by checking this thing out. It really sucks to shoot yourself, so we always make sure our guns are empty, make them safe. It's empty. So we'll take the slide off this bad boy and set the frame aside. We've already put all the parts in here, all the springs and new trigger and whatnot in here. So all we got to do is this 2 springs in the slide, and so we'll field strip it, which is easy enough. If you own this thing and you a guy that's going to put a competition trigger in here, then obviously you'll know how to field strip it already. Well, it's simple. It doesn't take a lot of tools to do this. We're simply going to take a punch appropriately sized to push in on the striker retainer, for lack of a better term. We'll call it the striker retainer. And then this back plate right here slides off this way. Now behind here is the safety pin, and it's spring loaded, and the striker itself spring loaded. So you want to be careful not to just slide off, have everything go shoot across. So what we do is we take and push in on this, and then down. You can start that down and then get your, as you can see, I've got a gap in here now, but I haven't taken it clear down. Now I'm going to put my finger there before I slide this out, because I'm going to catch all the parts that are spring loaded. So there's the striker sleeve, I call it, or guide. I think it's a striker guide, the striker indicator guide, and here's the striker spring. And then this is the striker indicator. It's not the actual firing pin or the striker. It's the indicator that comes out the back through this guide that shows when the pistol's cocked. The firing pin's still inside here, and it's retained by a roll pin, I believe. And we don't have to tear it down that far to do this, so we were not going to bother doing that. So then we're going to take this safety, because the striker can't go unless this is pushed in, and we're going to take this out. And the way we do that is there's a pin right in the back here, and we're going to drop that out, and we push this down a little bit. If you push this down, it relieves the pressure on the pin, and it should drop right out. And now you can take the safety out, and you'll see that in here is the spring, and this spring and the striker spring are the 2 springs that get replaced in this kit. That spring right there, that comes right out of here. I'm hoping I'm doing it where you can see it well, and then the striker spring comes right out of here. So we simply set those aside, and I'm just going to feign setting them aside and bring out the new springs that we want to install that came in our kit. And on this spring right here, we just put a little dab of grease, or you can just put a little dab of grease in the hole on the safety, and that holds the spring. So while you're working on this, the spring don't fall out. It makes it a lot easier, and the grease don't hurt anything, and it just stays in there and gives lubrication for that part. That part's pretty sealed up, so it won't attract any dust you have to worry about. So it's as simple as going reverse with this. Your striker's already, your firing pin's already in here. So we're going to come back in, we're going to put this in, and if you probably can't see down in here, but in this hole right here, is another hole that the spring goes in. It's toward the muzzle. So if you just set this in this way, spring, set in this way, that spring will find its way right into that hole. Now I'm going to pull off camera here so I can see while I do this. And then you push that down. You just have to, all you have to do is push this down with your finger and kind of hold it while you put this striker safety pin back in. And the pin has a little groove in it. I don't know if you can see that on here, but there's a little groove in that pin, and that groove goes toward the back of the pistol. And then you just set that in. You set that in right here, and you push it all the way in there. And then when you release pressure on the safety, they'll catch each other, and then it won't want to fall out on you. And it's just that simple. Then you put, another thing I'll show you is this spring, this goes in first, the indicator. It goes in, and then the spring's going over this, like so. And then when this goes in, this pin has to go inside the hole in this. If you're having trouble putting this together, it's usually because this pin's not lining up quite correctly and going in that hole. So as the way I do it is I drop this in first, then I put my spring on. And when I go to put this in, I got to make sure that I got it going around that pin, or it won't go all the way down in there for me. Again, when I put that on, you can see the pin bopping around in there, and this hole in this retainer or backplate lock or whatever it's called has to go in around that pin. And then is what I do is, now this is under spring tension, and it's kind of a little tricky. So what I do is I get it held in there, and then I take a nice punch about this size here, and I hold the thing down there while I start this back plate back in. And it is a little bit of a juggling act, like many gunsmithing actions are. Someone probably makes a special tool for it and everything else, but I just kind of get it held down there with that, and I start this in, and then if I, theoretically, it's fun when you're making these and then it doesn't work. Again, start it in there, in the groove, and now you know I'm going to edit this all out of this, right? Me fumbling this. That's all going to get edited out. So start it in there, get this started, and then you should be able to catch it. See how I've caught just the edge of it, and just keep everything together, and then take my punch. I've got that caught now on that edge as I shove that in there, and then I can take my punch and depress it the rest of the way and get this up in there to the point where now it should just be able to slide shut with a click, and then this comes back up into this hole here. So that's down, that slides in, comes back up in the hole, and that's all there is to it. That's all there is to put the two springs in the slide for the finished installation of the Powder River XDM enhanced competition trigger, what have you. And we just put the pistol back together. So what I would tell you about this kit is it's going to give you a pretty light trigger. And the trigger's super nice. It's light. I'm going to measure it in a second here and then let you know what it is. But it's a lot lighter than the standard trigger, and it could get you in some trouble. When you're competing, you're all excited shooting in a USP, SA, or what is it, International Defensive, IDPA match. And you're shooting real faster and a lot of pressure. You're going to want to double tap this, you may actually shoot another round. So depending on the rules of whatever type of shoot you're shooting in, that could cost you. So, some rules, Comstock is one that comes to mind. You can shoot extra shots, it doesn't cost you, and take your highest score, it just costs you time. But some rules, if you shoot extra shots, you get penalized real big for it. And that can be a problem with the light trigger when you're all excited. It may not be the best idea for concealed carry because of that light trigger, and when you're under a lot of stress and pressure, you know, a light trigger is not always the way to go. I think if you take this out and practice with it, you'd be fine. It's not like a hair, but it's pretty light. I know it's going to be down around 2 pounds, 2.5 pounds, so which is much lighter than a standard pistol trigger. In fact, I'm going to go grab a scale right now and we'll measure it. All right, so here we go. Let's check out this trigger and see what it ended up being. Check the gun, make sure it's empty. Depress the grip safety, put our trusty trigger pull gauge on here. 3.5 pounds. So that's a lot lighter. I think a standard trigger on here is probably 5, 6, 7 pounds. 3.5 pounds. It's an average about 3.5 pounds, which is much lighter in stock. So just be careful with it. Once you get used to it, you should be fine. Really great trigger, really great reset on it. When you let out to get that reset, so you can follow up shots are real fast. This is a good gun. This is a good competition gun. Stock 9mm holds 19 rounds in this XDM, and you can squeeze 2 or 3 more in with one of these base plates. And these are good, really competitive in the limited class at pistol shoots. So I'm really happy with this gun, and we made a couple of cool holsters for them, and I like my little cross on there because Jesus rocks. Well, I hope this video helped you, and you'll be safe, and I appreciate you watching it, and God bless.